Right now, if your throat starts to tickle or a headache begins to throb, you reach into a plastic cabinet and swallow a small, white pill. Water slides down your throat. Within 20 minutes, the pain fades and you go back to your day without a second thought. You live in a world where microscopic chemical compounds are synthesized in sterile laboratories to quiet your suffering. But for 99% of human existence, that plastic cabinet did not exist. There were no pharmacies, no sterile bandages, and no synthetic antibiotics to fight off infection. When fever struck, the forest was dark, the night was cold, and help was only as good as the hands around you. You might picture ancient humans as helpless victims of every microbe and broken bone, dragging themselves through the dirt until they simply ceased to exist. But the real answer to how your ancestors survived illness is far stranger than modern folklore suggests. They were not helpless, nor were they callous. In fact, their approach to sickness fundamentally rewritten what it means to be human. When illness entered a hunter-gatherer band, it threatened everyone. A sick hunter could not track prey. A feverish mother could not forage for tubers. In a world governed by immediate physical demand, sickness looked like a death sentence. How did your body manage to pass its lineage down through millions of seasons of disease? Why are you sitting here today intact and breathing, despite thousands of generations facing ruthless pathogens without modern science? The secret lies in a profound combination of natural pharmacology, radical empathy, and deep biological adaptation. Consider what happened when an ancient human felt the first chills of a fever. Long before microbiology existed, your ancestors paid meticulous attention to the subtle cues of the natural world. They observed animals. They experimented with plants. They noticed that certain bitter roots alleviated stomach cramps, while specific tree barks cooled a burning forehead. For decades, traditional history assumed this was simple trial and error, or perhaps magical thinking without true therapeutic value. But modern science has uncovered remarkable evidence that ancient medicine was far more sophisticated than anyone previously believed. Dr. Karen Hardy, a leading researcher in prehistoric archaeology at the Catalan Institution for Research and Advanced Studies, conducted groundbreaking research on fossilized dental calculus, the hardened plaque on ancient teeth. By analyzing microscopic plant fragments trapped in the teeth of Neanderthals from El Sidrón Cave in northern Spain, her team made a startling discovery. They found ingested trace remnants of bitter, non-nutritional plants, specifically chamomile and yarrow. These plants hold virtually no caloric value, meaning your ancient relatives were not eating them for food. Chamomile is well known for soothing digestive distress, while yarrow is a natural anti-inflammatory and antiseptic. Even more astonishing was the discovery of populus bark fragments, which naturally contain salicylic acid, the active ingredient in modern aspirin. One individual had a dental abscess and a stomach pathogen, and his teeth revealed he had been consuming both populus bark and natural penicillium mold from decaying vegetation. He was self-medicating with pain relievers and primitive antibiotics over 40,000 years ago. How did they know which plant to chew? They relied on sensory feedback and cultural transmission passed down across hundreds of generations. Your ancestors built a living library in their minds. They understood that taste was an ancient diagnostic tool. A sharp, bitter taste often signaled alkaloids that could alter bodily state. When you feel an instinctual aversion to bitter foods today, you are experiencing the lingering footprint of that ancient warning system. But when your ancestors were sick, they intentionally sought out those bitter compounds to alter their internal state. They turned the natural world into a dynamic medicine chest, yet plants were only half the equation. What happened when an individual was too broken or ill to chew, forage, or move at all? If early humans functioned strictly by survival of the fittest, a severely sick companion would have been left behind to perish. The cold logic of nature would dictate abandoning the weak to conserve precious calories for the healthy. But the fossil record reveals something entirely different. It reveals an extraordinary commitment to caregiving that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years. Dr. Penny Spickens, an evolutionary archaeologist at the University of York, has dedicated years to analyzing the physical evidence of healthcare in early hominins. Her work focuses on paleopathology, the study of ancient disease and trauma through fossilized bones. The evidence she and her colleagues have gathered turns traditional assumptions on their head. Consider the skeleton known as Shanidar I, discovered in a cave in modern-day Iraq. Shanidar I was an adult male who lived around 45,000 years ago. His skull had suffered a massive blow that crushed his right eye socket, likely leaving him partially or completely blind in one eye. His right arm was severely fractured in multiple places, withered, and amputated above the elbow. He had severe degenerative joint disease in his legs and walked with a pronounced limp. Under the ruthless rules of predator-prey dynamics, Shanidar I should have perished within days of his injuries. He could not hunt. He could not run quickly from predators. He could not contribute to the physical labor of the group in a traditional way. Yet detailed analysis of his bones shows that his severe injuries had healed decades before his death. He lived to be roughly 40 or 50 years old, an advanced age for the Paleolithic era. How did he survive for decades with such catastrophic physical limitations? The only logical explanation is that his group actively cared for him. They shared their food with him. They carried his load when the group moved campsites. They protected him from predators and cleaned his wounds. They kept him alive, not because he was biologically useful in a hunt, but because he was part of their social fabric. This was not an isolated incident. Across numerous archaeological sites worldwide, scientists have uncovered bones showing severe healed fractures, advanced trepanation, and debilitating congenital conditions that required long-term nursing care. Consider Ramito II, a teenager who lived 14,000 years ago in what is now Italy. Ramito II suffered from severe dwarfism and crippling joint disease, making movement painful and difficult. Chemical analysis of his bones reveals he ate the exact same high-protein diet as the healthiest hunters in his tribe. His community willingly devoted substantial resources to ensure he thrived alongside everyone else. Why did your ancestors invest so heavily in nursing the sick? Was it purely emotional affection, or was there an evolutionary advantage hidden within empathy? Dr. Penny Spickens argues that healthcare was not merely a luxury of human culture, it was a primary driver of human evolution. Nursing a sick band member preserved valuable wisdom, emotional bonding, and group cohesion. An elder who could no longer hunt might remember where water was hidden during a catastrophic drought 30 years ago. An injured grandmother could pass on language, storytelling, and tool-making techniques to children. By choosing to heal rather than abandon, your ancestors unlocked a social superpower that made human bands far more resilient than any solitary predator. When illness struck, care was not passive. Ancient humans performed active physical medical interventions that sound terrifying to modern ears, yet yielded astonishing success rates. Take the practice of trepanation, drilling or scraping a hole into the human skull. It is one of the oldest surgical procedures known to science, dating back over 10,000 years across nearly every continent. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of prehistoric skulls featuring neat, circular holes cut into the bone. Your initial reaction might be to shudder at the thought of unanesthetized brain surgery in a dark cave. But when researchers examine these skulls under microscopes, they find something unbelievable. In over 70% of cases, the edges of the bone show smooth, rounded regrowth. This means the bone had time to heal, while the patient was still alive. The patient survived the surgery and lived for months, years, or even decades afterward. Why would ancient healers cut open a skull? They were treating head trauma from hunting accidents or warfare, relieving intracranial pressure caused by swelling, or attempting to cure chronic, unbearable migraines. They possessed precise anatomical knowledge. They knew exactly how deep to scrape without piercing the dura mater, the delicate membrane protecting the brain. They washed wounds with sterile boiled water, honey, or antimicrobial plant resins, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of infection control thousands of years before bacteria were identified. What about when the threat was invisible? What happened when an epidemic of fever swept through an ancient encampment? In those moments, your ancestors relied on a sophisticated biological response that you still experience every time you catch a bug today. When a pathogen enters your bloodstream, your body initiates a cascade of chemical signals designed to alter your behavior. You suddenly feel exhausted. Your appetite vanishes. You want to crawl under a heavy blanket and isolate yourself in a dark, quiet place. For a long time, doctors viewed these symptoms as unpleasant side effects of disease. But evolutionary biologist Dr. Mark Kissel and researchers in evolutionary medicine have demonstrated that these symptoms are actually an active, highly coordinated survival strategy programmed into your DNA. The sudden loss of appetite deprives invading bacteria of iron and nutrients they need to replicate. The deep lethargy forces you to conserve every single calorie, directing your metabolic energy entirely toward your immune system. The instinct to pull away from others acts as an ancient quarantine mechanism, preventing the spread of infection across your small social group. When you lie in bed feeling miserable, your body is executing an ancient software program designed by millions of years of microbial warfare. Your ancestors complemented this internal biology with active behavioral rituals. They utilize sweat lodges and heat exposure to mimic and amplify the body's natural fever response. They used smoke from aromatic plants like cedar, sage, and sweetgrass to purify living spaces, plants that modern lab tests have proven contain powerful airborne antimicrobial properties. They bathed in thermal mineral springs enriched with sulfur and magnesium to soothe skin infections and aching joints. Every culture on Earth developed its own localized pharmacopoeia and therapeutic traditions, grounded in acute observation of cause and effect. Consider how your body responds to a cut today. Blood vessels constrict immediately to slow bleeding. Clotting factors form a dense fibrous mesh. White blood cells swarm the area to devour opportunistic bacteria. Within hours, skin cells begin dividing at rapid speed to stitch the boundary back together. This intricate cellular orchestra was honed across hundreds of millions of years of mammalian survival. Every scratch your ancestors survived, every bout of food poisoning they endured, and every seasonal virus they beat left an imprint on your genetic code. You carry the elite immune memory of thousands of survivors. You are the descendant of the individuals whose immune systems adapted the fastest, whose wounds healed the cleanest, and whose communities cared the deepest. When you look back at the history of human sickness, it is easy to feel a sense of pity for those who lived before modern medicine. You might imagine them shivering in drafty shelters, helpless against the invisible monsters of infection and disease. Society praises modern gadgets, synthetic drugs, and gleaming hospitals as the sole guardians standing between you and death. But this perspective misses the profound truth of human history. Modern medicine did not invent healing. It simply automated the knowledge and empathy that kept your ancestors alive for hundreds of thousands of years. The true story of ancient healthcare is not a story of primitive ignorance. It is a story of astounding observation, biological resilience, and radical human devotion. Long before microscope lenses revealed bacteria, human beings understood that survival was a collective effort. They learned to read the chemistry of plants, They mastered basic surgical techniques under extreme conditions. They constructed social safety nets out of shared meals, gentle touch, and quiet vigilance around nighttime fires. They refused to measure a person's worth strictly by their physical output on a hunt. So the next time your throat starts to tickle or a headache begins to throb, take a moment to look at your surroundings. Remember that you are not just a frail biological organism vulnerable to the microscopic world. You are the living outcome of an unbroken chain of human courage, intuitive science, and relentless care. The white pill in your cabinet is a modern convenience, but the true warmth keeping you safe was built by hands that refused to let each other go.